On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we speak with Ron Haberman, VP of Nokia Networks CloudBand Business Unit, to discuss platform updates and get an overview on carrier adoption. Thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief at RCR Wireless News. Well, Nokia Networks recently closed on its acquisition of Alcatel-Lucent, which bolstered its equipment and services portfolio as it competes against fellow telecom vendors like Ericsson and Huawei. The purchase also included Alcatel-Lucent's extensive virtualization and cloud work, some of which was under the CloudBand banner. That program was rolled out in 2013 with a focus on creating an open ecosystem for service providers, developers, and vendors interested in adopting virtualized platforms. The CloudBand business quickly garnered dozens of partners, including telecom operators DT and Telefonica. Nokia, for its part, has also been working on cloud and virtualization platforms, including the launch in 2014 of what it said was the first commercial carrier-grade telco cloud deployment that used NFV to enable VoLTE. With the once rivals now one, Nokia said it's looking to accelerate progress in terms of supporting the growing need for NFV and cloud platforms from telecom operators. This includes support for the Nokia Cloud Services and positioning of a standalone NFV platform designed to support carrier needs regardless of VNF or hardware provider. Nokia added the new portfolio structure more directly matches ETSI architecture and the need of customers for self-contained products and support of interoperability in a multi-vendor environment, for certification tools and processes designed to help service providers get to market faster, and continued emphasis on support of an open source environment. The combined platform, which officially launched on April 13th under one umbrella, is scheduled for commercial availability in July. On today's show, we have an interview with Ron Haberman, who's the VP of Nokia's CloudBand Business Unit, to get an update on the company's virtualization and cloud platform work, an update on integrating the Alcatel-Lucent assets with a look towards 5G technology and the Internet of Things, and a look at general trends and challenges he sees in the current mobile telecom environment. Let's take a look at that interview now. All right, well, thanks for joining us this week. This week we are joined by Ron Haberman, who's the VP of Nokia's CloudBand Business Unit, talking a bit about the company's cloud business as well as the overall market view as well. So hey, Ron, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, maybe we'll start off with, for those who don't know about the CloudBand unit, maybe a little overview of kind of what the project is, what that part of Nokia, what you guys do there.
Sure. So CloudBand was created at former Alcatel and now in the new Nokia to take care of the cloud infrastructure. We're responsible for providing company-wide support for this very, very important migration and transformation that is happening at the customer base, moving from the world of physical network elements and into virtual network elements. We support the company and third party in all the domains defined by ETSI, starting from the infrastructure software itself to the VNFM, all the way up to the orchestration on top.
Very good. And so those people who are familiar with the Alcatel-Lucent CloudBand product, it's a very similar project, just under the Nokia umbrella at this point now too.
Well, overall, I think it's fair to say that it is similar, but it is actually much, much bigger. And we actually got quite a lot of quite important elements that we are now integrating between the two companies. It's been quite an exciting quarter almost since the day one as we defined it. We have hit quite a few milestones, getting the teams working together, understanding the differences in approaches coming from the two different companies. But in essence, the go-to-market, the critical piece for the customer base is indeed very, very similar. I mean, it starts with the foundation, really creating a platform for VNFs to run on. That's true, obviously, for our own VNFs, which are now quite a few. But also the orchestration piece and the availability of the system for third parties to integrate with is also quite important. And that's something that came actually from both companies. Former Nokia had a pretty interesting ecosystem. CloudBand ecosystem was brought obviously from the former Alu side as well. And now in the new Nokia, we have a very, very nice ecosystem of partners that all integrate as part of the platform.
Very good. Yeah, I think a little bit later on, maybe we'll talk a bit about kind of interworking with the other partners as well. But maybe again, when it comes to kind of this move towards virtualization, I know obviously both companies there and now Nokia have done a lot of work in the past on this. I mean, I guess do you have any use cases or any sort of examples of how some of your customers have actually been using these products either in a POC environment or an actual trial or rollout to this point?
Yeah, so actually, if last year was defined as the year of proof of concepts, this year is already well in implementation, and we see quite a big shift from trying things out to making things operational in real networks. And as you can imagine, in these kind of an environment, usually there are multiple tracks, right? So while there is a main track with almost every significant customer to build the end-to-end platform or the end platform, there are quite a few engagements with specific use cases that are making it faster into the network. And those include, on the one side, things like virtual CPE, which is a very common use case now almost everywhere in the world, trying to allow end users more flexibility and compatibility with picking elements and instantiating them upon request, to more traditional services like VoLTE, whether it's just the core IMS piece or whether it's with connection to the P gateways and S gateways that go along with it, moving customers from the traditional world into virtual, but also into a packet-based system. I would say these are the top ones. We see some others, VNFs like diameter routing, AAA, DNS, and other software elements making it into the virtual world. Mm-hmm. And all that, of course, is happening alongside of building end-to-end systems as the end game for moving all the functions into the virtual world. If I can focus maybe just a few minutes, sure. If last year and obviously still today, the focus of almost all the engagement has been on the infrastructure software, what we call now in the new Nokia, the CloudBand infrastructure software, or CBIS, on how to actually run a VNF or a collection of VNFs, whether they're coming from Nokia or from partners, in a very reliable way, mm-hmm. Augmenting the OpenStack, if you will, distros with carrier-grade features. Mm-hmm. This year, and definitely going into next year, we see more and more of the orchestration topics coming into play, requesting and requiring more and more automation for both VNF deployments, which is what we do with an application manager that is our VNFM. It's a generic VNFM open to third parties as well. And of course, also all the way up to the orchestrator itself, taking care of network services end-to-end in the virtual world.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, maybe touch a bit on the orchestration part, because that does seem to be one of those areas that is getting a lot of attention, obviously, because it is a very important part of this whole process, both from a service and a network level as well. I mean, it does seem like for years and years going forward, there will be kind of this operation of both legacy networks and these new virtualized networks. And so there'll be an orchestration aspect from there, but also in the VNF as well, like you mentioned. I guess the progress in terms of orchestration, how has that been, I guess, working through the system? I mean, it does seem like that has been a bit of a challenge, perhaps, maybe a daunting task for a lot of people, but it sounds like some progress is being made there. How would you view the overall progress in terms of kind of the orchestration work out in the market?
Indeed. I mean, there is definitely progress. We need to remember that the move to network service orchestration, especially when it comes to cloud environments, is not simply a technology challenge. Yeah. There is actually quite a bit of operational challenges, trust that needs to be built into the system, because what we're talking about here is bringing a lot of automation into what used to be quite a manual process of bringing new services into these systems. And it's understandable that before operators go hands off and say, okay, we trust the system to do the right thing, we trust customers to launch whatever applications, VNFs, and chains of VNFs, they would want to make sure that the basics work. And I think this is the progression that we have been seeing in the past few months and even a year, the building blocks are proving themselves, and we see more and more traditional VNFs, such as IMS, SDN, diameter routing, some routers in the form of EPC, for example, making it into the systems, such that the automation behind that, going to the VNFM, expansion, for example, automated tests of the deployments, things like that that are going on, allow the next level to almost natively be coming around the corner, where you can actually define a complete chain and trust the system to deploy the chain wherever is the best place to deploy the chain across servers, sometimes even across data centers. Likely, we're not going to see still this year big orchestration deployments, but some will happen already this year. Many will happen next year.
Makes sense. I guess on the topic of trust, then, at this point, is it a bigger challenge for vendors out there to have the trust of operators, or is the big challenge still the technology aspect? Because it does seem like from the POCs and the success there, and the companies I've talked to, a lot of vendors, they all seem fairly comfortable and confident in the technology aspects. I mean, obviously, there's still some interoperability work that needs to be done, but for the most part, it seems like there's a pretty good comfort level, at least from the vendor side of things. Is it just a matter of getting the operators now to kind of trust this automation? Because, like you said, legacy systems are very manual intensive, and operators are so used to how those things work. Trusting stuff to automation is a big jump for these operators.
Sure, and let's not forget that also the control that an operator has here is quite different. If you in the past, in the physical world especially, a piece of software was running on dedicated hardware, and a single group was responsible for the end-to-end of that function. Now there's at least one split, right, where infrastructure is controlled by one group, the software itself is controlled by another, and the orchestration is something that kind of sits there and ties the two together. So beyond the trust between the operator and the vendor, which I think for the most part is there, right? There needs to be trust in the system doing the right thing, and the invisible part, if you will, actually running correctly. So to that end, what we are doing is investing quite a bit in the open source community to create more visibility. We started a project called Virtualization in OpenStack. It's completely open source. The idea behind it is not to simply add more monitoring tools. I think that there's plenty of input of alarms and monitoring tools and capabilities out there in the market. What is missing, which I think is going to help this trust, is to actually tie them all together and create an engine that actually tells an operator, look, this is what's happening in the scene between the physical world and the virtual world, or between all the different software activity that needs to be tied into something that is going on right now. And that is the point of the tool, right? It's to create visibility such that any operator at any layer can actually understand what is happening in the layers that are now hidden from it. This project started middle of last year. We had quite nice participation from the community, including some of our competition, which is always good in the open source world.
Yeah, I guess maybe we'll touch a bit on the open source part of this, because it does seem like that is becoming a very important part of this virtualized world. I mean, a lot of companies are moving towards the open source platform. OpenStack obviously is a big part of this. A lot of work done with Etsy and other organizations to kind of bring more open source to this Linux Foundation and all their different various organizations as well too. I guess can you touch a bit on the progress of that, because it does seem like that is a bit of a change perhaps for the vendor community in general when it comes to telecom. Legacy systems have always been somewhat proprietary, and at the end of the day, they all tend to work together. But a lot of the core technology was always very proprietary. With this move towards open source, how important is that for Nokia, and what's your view on how the community has really come together around that to kind of work together on these topics?
Yeah, so I mean, I think open source is key to cloud in general, very much so in the NFV space. The core of the system, in most cases being OpenStack, dictates quite a bit of this attitude. We joined maybe a little bit late, right, to the thinking about open source. We started early last year to engage heavily We're actively participating now in every OpenStack summit. We are contributing quite heavily to several projects. Some of them are core, some of them are new. But the keys, for us, open source is a complete part of the product. That there is what we call upstream alignment in the design, which to us means we need to design features and add-ons in a way to make them available to the community. So we're not looking just to use open source, which I believe is part of every system, but we actually design capabilities in such a way that we can contribute them back. Okay? It's also important to maybe highlight that open source is a little bit of an overloaded term. Okay, there's many ways to do things in the open source community. To me, the community is the key. Okay, if you're going to be part of open source, you need to be truly part of it, meaning contribute to an existing project if such one exists, or bring others to contribute to your project if you decided that something new is required. It's not simply about opening the code, it's rather getting partners and customers to participate with you in enhancing the feature set. Okay. And it's quite core for us today to be part of the community.
Makes sense. I mean, I guess in general, then do all these different various offshoots of, like, say, the Linux Foundation with their OP NFV and Open Daylight, ONOS, all these different kind of projects. Do you think that these are helping the overall community? Because for myself covering all these, I mean, it seemed like, especially last year, it seemed like every week there was a new organization that seemed to have popped up touting open source, a different slice of the overall pie. Do you feel that these are all helping towards the end game of this, or is there a bit of fragmentation going on in terms of maybe we're slicing up this big pie a little too thin in some areas, and it might be a problem later on to put this all back together so it all actually works?
Well, there might be a little bit of slicing too thin situation going on, but I actually prefer that to the opposite.
Sure.
Okay, there would be some fragmentation in the short term. Then there's going to be some consolidation. We're monitoring obviously all of the different options. We want to make sure that there is heavy usage and participation in the project. Look at OpenStack, right, being the core. I mean, it took quite some time for the consolidation to happen, for the core projects to be solidified. I don't think it's something to be worried about, as long as there is actual activity and developers coming together to discuss the code, right? What we need to be worried about is definitions, right, with no code behind them.
Yeah.
But I don't think that is anymore, at least, a big concern, right? I think that there is enough developers that are now in discussions. Obviously, there are some different ideas out there as to how to go and implement and in what form. But that's already kind of like in the second phase of actually trying to bring a solution together, right? Much better than what we had last year.
Yeah, and I guess then, I mean, does it seem like then that the standards bodies who, maybe an ETSI, for instance, is kind of behind a lot of this, are they, do you think, able to stay up or I guess keep pace with what seems to be a pretty rapid evolution in terms of the open source? I mean, obviously the open source community is very active. I mean, I've gone to several shows in the past couple of weeks even. It just seems like there's constant, movement there and new ideas coming out. Is that making it tricky for someone like ETSI, for instance, which is kind of tasked with a bit of a standards process to kind of stay on top of all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. I mean, I think, look, not to sound negative, that's not my intention.
Sure.
The NFV space compared to the bigger IT problem statement in general is still somewhat unique, and it needs a little bit of a more focused group to look at it. OpenStack in general, right, is not 100% NFV focused, right? Where our goal, right, and obviously where we think we contribute the most coming out of Nokia is to make sure that these systems are very well suited for what the operators need in order to go fast with an NFV deployment. So bodies like the ETSI contribute quite a bit in creating this focus, making sure that developers are armed with what they need to think about, mostly in OpenStack, but not only, to bring the capabilities together, right? So yeah, not only do I think they keep pace, I think that they're actually driving it quite a bit.
Very good. Okay. And again, maybe touching a bit on what you just mentioned about the fact that, this is something that carriers do want out there. I mean, it does seem like the timing of this move towards virtualization, at least for telecom operators, is segueing very nicely with a lot of talk about, whether it's IoT or 5G, for instance. Obviously, those are two of the big acronyms that we hear on an hourly basis, it seems like at this point. I guess as you look at the overall ecosystem, I guess how do you view how CloudBand and how your guys' work, integrates with this move towards IoT and this move towards 5G, which seems to be coming at a fairly rapid pace. Obviously, we're still some years away in terms of some standards there, but what's your view of how CloudBand kind of works with all of those processes?
Well, both of these projects, 5G and IoT, open quite a bit of new opportunities, new designs, and they have a requirement for much more compute. Yeah. As you combine, right, the opportunity and the need for compute with use cases that are just now being finalized, many more that we really haven't thought about yet, but will become something that the community would dream up, right, upon availability of more bandwidth, better latency, more control over endpoints. The existence of a system that provides infrastructure, right? So access to compute, storage, networking, pretty much wherever you need it. Almost everybody looking at 5G and IoT are looking at distribution. The need to control, right, a distributed data center is critical. Mm-hmm. When you combine that with the automation we talked about before, namely the orchestration, tying it together means that when these use cases that are very compute heavy come together, the availability of a system to allow a designer to come in and create new feature set, just like they would on a cloud, becomes critical. Now, when you look specifically at the use cases that have already been identified, for example, in the world of IoT, simply looking at how to aggregate a very large number of devices, right, with fairly small amounts of data but constant control, is something that just fits very, very well to a generic compute type of infrastructure. You map that to the next layer of actually being able to create middleware to connect these devices and save some of the work that a designer would need to do in order to get usefulness coming out of these devices and an API exposed. It ties further, right, into the platform. And then finally, just the fact that you need to get to the edge and allow sometimes very, very quick direct connection between devices. And we see that more and more, not only with connected cards, but also with the now virtual reality and augmented realities
mm-hmm, yeah.
Looking at this kind of system where smaller data centers focus on delivering applications to users become critical.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like all this is just amazing. Because it's all kind of building on itself. It's necessary for all the evolution as well. So the timing seems impressive. And I'm guessing too the fact that unlike perhaps previous network evolutions or even revolutions, it seems like this move towards virtualization and again IoT and 5G as well. You almost have like a built-in customer base. I mean, you're not having to go out there, it seems like, and sell the operators on this. It seems like the operators want this. I mean, they're almost coming to you guys, and from the operators I've talked to about this, they are trying to push, it seems like, the community as fast as they can to come up with solutions for them. So it seems like, from a vendor perspective, it's got to be nice to not have to be chasing business. It's almost like the business is just coming to you and saying, hey, we need more and more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely quite a bit of pull coming from our customer base, namely the operators, and I think that they see, the pull, from their customer base, the end users as well. Yeah. What is missing is really the availability of platforms and the direct attachment in cases between, those two endpoints, right? The cloud had proven, right, that innovation can happen when you actually have enough resources available. Okay? I think as we deploy, right, there would be more and more developers jumping into the system, creating capabilities that today are too far blocked from making it into a live network, right? The process, right, from when you have a piece of software available to when an end user can actually make use of it, is still too long, right? And the goal is to basically shrink it to the cloud era, to where you as a developer would go when you want to just put something on a more central cloud, such as Amazon or Azure.
Yeah, but I guess then maybe looking at that overall time frame, I mean, what's your view of kind of how, I guess, when will those platforms be ready to go in these sort of time frames that people are looking at? I mean, are we still looking at several years out? I mean, I know, talking with companies the past couple of years, it always seemed like it was going to be just, next year. I think maybe some reality is maybe set in a little bit in terms of what the timing will be, but what's your general view, Nokia's general view of when we can start to expect these broader deployments by telecom operators of virtualized platforms using NFV, SDN, and cloud and things like that?
So I think what we're looking at this year and next year is the years of implementation. Okay. Not at any significant scale, in my opinion. Right? I'll be very happy to be proven wrong. But it's part of the required learning phase, right? Put the systems in, install some services, open the agility process to true CI, bring new services in, right? Learn to trust the system, and then scale. Yeah. I guess
it's almost a bit like that fast fail mentality, which you're trying to bring to this whole the whole process. You almost have to have that same kind of mentality in terms of rolling these things out. I mean, you have to, like you said, trust them, put them out there, work with them, and see how they react to your network.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a mind shift, right? It's not simply a technology shift that we now need to embrace. If we're going to go and build a true cloud, right, we need to allow for fast fail when we start thinking about new services. And in my opinion, that's actually the harder, right, piece, right, more so than the technology, because it's so different from how networks have been built in the past. Some operators are further along in the thinking, right? Some are still considering, but I think, at the end of the day, it's a timing, right? It's timing and mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to ask my guests on the show here too. What do you feel is always that I guess that one big challenge still out there, kind of ahead of you guys? What keeps you up at night? What keeps you up on the weekends? I mean, it seems like what you're saying a bit is just kind of maybe is it just getting that trust from the operators out there, or what to you is that one big challenge?
Yeah, it's the operational view. Okay. I mean, if you had asked me this time last year, I mean, my biggest concern would have been that there aren't enough actual people responsible for operations, right? In the discussions, looking of how they're actually going to understand and learn and operate the nuts and bolts, right, of the system. We see quite a lot more of it today, right? So now what keeps me at night is to actually create all the tools that they now come at us and say, look, I mean, we really need to have a very, very clear view of what's going on. And yes, the system has a lot of automation. The system has a lot of recovery capabilities, but we still want to understand what's going on. Okay, so all this cool stuff that we have, right? The cost of it is that we actually have a little bit of complexity, right? There are multiple layers that now need to be well understood, and now we're busy, implementing that visibility and operationalizing systems to the satisfaction of our customers.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know I've talked to some operators about this, and that's, one of their concerns is always, the operations guy who's, gets a call on Saturday night that something went down on the network, and, he's maybe not familiar at all with this new, platform. And he's obviously used to all kind of the legacy systems and how they worked. But again, you've got this whole new system now that he has to try to figure out, and, you hate to get that weekend call, and getting everybody kind of up to speed on what's happening seems to be a big challenge for everybody throughout the whole ecosystem, really.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, that's, I think, where most of the effort is. How do you hide as much information as possible, information that might not be relevant? Yep. How do you autocorrect, right, any issue and hide it from the layers above? We call it domain responsibility, right? As we look at the stack, right, the different managers that needs to be part of the system, we want to actually create as narrow focused view as possible for every layer, such that whatever is within a domain of a particular system can be completely controlled, managed, and corrected before communicating a root cause to the layer above, to make operation of this system as trivial as possible.
Yeah. Make sure. Yeah, you want to have that decision making. You want to have actionable intelligence, I guess, or maybe just something that someone can actually use to make a decision that they need to use if it's not automated at that point. So
that's right.
Yeah, very important there. Well, Ron, we definitely appreciate the good insight on this. Obviously, it's a topic that is just growing and growing. I know from vendors like Nokia, for instance, you guys are doing a lot of work in this space as well. So we definitely appreciate the insight on this today. Thanks so much for the time, and hopefully we can touch base again soon on the topic and get an update from you guys. But again, thanks for the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's show. Make sure to check us out again next week when we are scheduled to speak with Red Hat Storage on evolving storage needs for cloud infrastructure.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.